I recently went thrifting and found the most beautiful purple and taupe fabric that I fell in love with. When I got home, I paired it with this old pillow sham that I had laying around, and I knew right away that I wanted to make this into this beautiful sort of overnight boudoir, shabby chic bag that has kind of a carpet bag feel. So that's what we'll be making today. We'll start by making a pattern that's shaped like this. I'm starting with a rectangle that is 24 inches across and 16 inches tall. I'm using packing paper, but wrapping paper works good too. I'm going to fold that in half. Now on the side that's open, I'm going to go to the top and from the side over measure 3.5 inches and make a mark. Now from that mark to this corner, I'm going to lay a yardstick, draw a line and cut it out. I recently found a large piece of fabric at the thrift store, and it's sort of a chenille feel, almost a tapestry look with these traditional patterns. I just love it. I took that pattern we just made and I cut out 2 pieces. I had at home a beautiful pillow sham that was almost between a velvet and a flannel feel, which felt very rich and nice, and the colors were perfect with this fabric. So I am going to make the flap for the bag, and it is U-shaped. And you can do any shape you want, but if you want to know exactly how to get this pattern, I'm going to show you. I have one for the front, and this will actually be the underlining. So I'm cutting out 2 of this pattern. So I'm starting out with almost a square that's 8.5 inches across and 7.75 inches tall. Then I'm going to fold this in half and I get this. So on the open side at the top, I'm measuring over 1 inch, making a mark. And then from the top down, I'm measuring 3.5 inches, make a mark. And then from the top down, 5.25 inches, make a mark. Now, I'll go from this dot to this dot. Now, this side I want a little bit straight, and then I'll curve it at the corner there, and then I sort of straighten it back out at the bottom, and then just cut it out. So then I went to my pillow sham, found 2 pretty clusters of flowers that I liked, traced, and cut them out. I want to trim this in like vintage lace. I went to my stash and pulled out some doilies and table runners, made a couple little piles, and I had to dye this. I have links in my description of videos where I dye things. I just mixed and matched to try to coordinate the purple with the purple. It's kind of an eggplant, and there's kind of a taupey color in here too, so I tried to coordinate some of the lace with that. I'll put a link in my description. Fast forward to the end of those videos because most of my dyeing takes place at the end. Majority of these are from my basket of scraps, but I do have to cut some, and I'm trying to keep them about 2 to 3 inches tall. I don't want them all the same height, and about 8 to 11 inches wide because I want to alternate. And I'm using my Pink Power electric scissors. It saves my tendonitis wrist. Around the 3 sides, I want to sew these 2 inches in from the side. So I'm making myself a guideline for when I go to my sewing machine. And I'm just going to use a marker because these are all going to be covered up, these lines. So I'll mark 2 inches 2 inches. Line those dashes up, make a straight line. And then I'll do the same here and here. I also want these sewn across the top, but I don't want them 2 inches down. I want them 3/4 of an inch down. So across the top, I'll make a line that's 3/4 of an inch. So this is my front piece. On the back piece, I am going to sew this taupey colored lace across the top as well, but not on the 3 sides. So I'll measure down 3/4 of an inch and make a line on this one. Now I'll take this to my sewing machine. I'll take my pile to my sewing machine and stitch along these 3 sides. I'll do the top one last because I want that to go completely across. And I am going to just do a little bit of pinch pleating. I have to be a little bit careful because this is all I dyed. I want to make sure I have enough for everything. So I'll start 3/4 of an inch down on this line. And so I'm using a straight stitch, and I'll coordinate the thread and just do a little bit of pinch pleating, sew, pinch pleat, sew. And then when I get to the end of one, I'll take another piece, overlap it a little bit, continue sewing all the way around. I have this pretty piece of sort of antique looking gold trim. Table runners and tree skirts are a great source at the thrift store for fun pieces of trim like this. And I am going to hide all these little raw edges. So I will take this. I want the scallop side laying against my purple so it can be seen better. And I will butt this up against that top line right here. And I'm going to overlap it about the 1/4 of an inch of this band here over top of the lace. And I'm not going to pin this. I will use a zigzag stitch, try to coordinate the thread, and just sew all the way around the 3 sides. When I get to the corner, I don't overthink mitering this. I just kind of work it the best I can. Then once I get this sewn, I'm going to come back. There's kind of a line down the center. I am going to go down that line with a straight stitch so that it doesn't flip up and do weird things. Now that I have my trim sewn, I'm going back up to that line that I made in the beginning, and I can go across with my lace. Now I'm prepping the purple lace to go around the edges, and I want this to be about 4 to 5 inches wide, and they're about 1 foot long. Now that I have my purple prepped, I'm going to kind of flip in these pieces of lace. Now the purple I'm only doing on the 3 sides, not on the top. And so when I go to my machine, I will start a piece of purple. I won't do any pinning, and I'll start 1/2 inch down from the top, and I'll lay this down, and I'm going to put the lace touching the inside of the bag. I want everything lined up this way with the edge. And I will pinch pleat it all the way around, and I will just overlap, keep going around, just like I did the taupey color. I'm trying to stay about a 1/4 inch from the edge. I want to stay fairly close to the edge, and I'm using a straight stitch. Now I want to do another thing across the top, and I have this big, you ever see these big fuzzy scarves at the thrift store? And they stretch way out. Well, mine has a bunch of greens and purple, so I thought that would be perfect for this project. So I just clipped off, these usually open up like tubes. I just cut a chunk off the bottom that is about 2 to 3 inches tall. I'm going to cut this in half. I'm going to sew this on the back piece and the front piece. And what I'm going to do is try to find an edge to catch on to. And I want to sew it as close to the top as I can. And I want it laying on the lace. I'm going to try to stay at the edge or the top of the bag. And then when everything's all sewn together, it kind of poofs up. And will look textural and cute. So I'm going to go sew that on with a straight stitch and do the opposite side. Now I'm going to set the front side aside for a little bit, and I'm going to add a pocket to the back. I want to make a U-shaped pocket, and I'll show you how you can get close to what this shape is. You can start with a piece of paper that's 9.5 inches across and 8.5 inches tall, and then fold it in half, and that's what I have here. I'm going to take a ruler and at the top over mark 1 inch, and then from the top down mark 4.25 inches, and then from the top down mark 5.5 inches, and then from the folded corner over 2.25 inches, and then just kind of connect the dots. Then with that pattern, I cut out a piece of that pillow sham, and this is the fabric that the main bag is made out of, only I'm using the back. Now I'm going to sew these together, right sides together. I want the wrong side of the fabric to actually be the side you see. So this will be my right side. Put it on top of the floral. And I am going to pin, I'm going to leave a 3-inch opening. So I'll pin here and pin here all the way around. And then I will sew from here, a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around to this pin. Now before I turn it right side out, whenever you have a curve, you have to, let me trim a little bit of this. You have to make little snips all around the curve so that when you turn it right side out, it lays nice and smooth. Now I'm going to turn it right side out and give it a good press. Now we still have an opening here. I'm going to tuck those in, press it, and top stitch it. Now I'll just go to my machine and about a 1/4 inch down, I'll just run a tidy straight stitch right across the top. I'm going to decorate this a little bit. I want to add this kind of antique-y looking gold and black trim. And then I'm going to put a butterfly in the middle. So what I'm going to do is take my ruler and measure down 1 inch, and I'm going to make little dashes for a guideline. Then I'm going to take this to my machine. I'm going to use a zigzag stitch. I'll fold this side under so it's nice and clean. I'll start right at the edge, and I'm going to line this little band right over top of the dash marks that I made and sew it all the way across. When I get to the end, I'll snip it, fold it under. Now I want to sew this little butterfly in the center. It's a broken brooch. So I'm just going to measure across here, find the center, make a mark so that I know he's centered when I sew him on. I have a needle and thread. My thread is doubled and knotted, and I'm using like a gold colored thread because I like to match the thread to the hardware, not to the fabric. And I will sew in probably 4 key areas, probably the corners of these 4 wings. And so I have to make sure there's a little hole somewhere in the piece in order to get my needle through. And this one's great. It has a bunch of them. I will sew that on, and I will put lots of stitches in because this is a back pocket. It will be hitting probably the side of the body. Now I want to pin this on. So I'm finding the center this way. And that's about there. And I'm just going to double check, make sure I have the same space there and there. Ooh, not even close. 6. Okay, that's good. And then I am going to measure down 5 inches. Try to find the edge through all that fuzz. 5 inches from the top. Now pin these securely because they have a tendency to shift around. And when you get the back pocket cockeyed, it's not good. Now I'm just going to pin the rest on. Now that that's all pinned, I am going to use a straight stitch, stay close to the edge, about 1/8 of an inch, go all the way around once, and then I'll do it again for extra durability, and I'll try to stay right on the same stitch line I did the first time. Go all the way around. Now I'm going to put these away for a little bit and make the flap of the bag. Okay, we made a pattern and cut these out earlier, and if you missed that, I'll put a timestamp up in the corner. I'm going to sew them together exactly like I did this pocket, and if you missed that, I will put a timestamp up in the corner for this as well. Okay, here's my flap. When you lift it up, front and back are both very pretty. And now I want to trim it. I have some tassel fringe. This is 3.5 inches tall, and I'm going to sew it to the outside. No pinning required for this. I am going to fold this top part over, and I'm going to see this band. I'm going to overlap it halfway onto my flap, and I'm going to start at the very top, but I don't want this tassel there because this will be sewn onto the bag, and that tassel will just get all wonky. Okay, and so I'm overlapping this band halfway, and I'm going to start in the center, and I'm going to do a straight stitch and just curve that around, and I'll have a little bit of puckering, but that's okay. And then when I get back to this side, fold it over, sew it. This tassel will probably be in the way. I'll probably have to cut that off. And then when I'm done sewing that, I'm going to come back with a straight stitch and sew closer to the edge here so everything is nice and smooth. Gorgeous. This is what it'll sort of look like on the front, but I still need to make a tassel and add a beautiful brooch. But I'm not going to do that till the very end because I don't want that stuff knocked around when I'm sewing lining and things like that. So the flap is on the front right now, but it actually, in order to be functional, needs to be sewn on to the back piece. First thing I have to do is find the center of the top of the bag here and find the center of my flap. So typically I would just use a yardstick and mark right on the outside, but you won't be able to see it because of all those fuzzies. So I made my mark right here. This was 16.5, so my mark is at 8.25. And I made a mark on the back. This is my front side. This is my back. So this is about 6 inches across. I made a mark at 3 inches right there. I want to lay this right sides together, and I'm going to line up those little marks that I made and stick a pin in it. I'm going to pin the flap all the way across. Now that I have that all pinned, I'm going to go to my sewing machine and come down about 1/4 of an inch and sew right across here, even the little piece of trim as well. And then once I get that sewn, I'll go back and double stitch it. Stay right on the same stitch line. Double stitch that for durability. Now I'm going to press that seam we just made. I'll put a thin little piece of fabric over to protect my materials. Parchment paper works too. Okay. Now, these aren't sewn together yet or anything. We'll do that after we do the straps. And I want 2 long shoulder straps. I am using the purple purse fabric, only the back side of it. I cut out 2 strips that are 35 inches long and 4.5 inches wide. I laid these out on my table and I'm looking at the right side. I want the wrong side down on the table, and I cut 2 pieces of cording. You want these to be pretty durable because we're going to be tugging on them, and I cut them so that they're just a few inches longer on each side. So I'm going to lay these down the center of my strap. And now I'm going to fold it in half, making sure this cord stays at the bottom of that fold. And I'm going to pin all the way along the whole strap on both. Now it's time to get them sewn. And what I'll do is I'll start right here over that cord, and I will sew over it like 5 or 6 times because we will be tugging on it and we don't want it to come loose. So once I stitch over that many times, I'll do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, come down the end. This end will be sewn shut and this end will be open. Come down, go down the side, and end right here. Now I'm done sewing, and on the end that is closed completely, you can cut that cord off. And then I'm going to cut a little snip at the corner to help it lay nice when you turn it right side out. And now you can turn them right side out. You just grab that cord. I like to scrunch it down a little ways, but I always work from the bottom. Otherwise, it'll get bunched up and impossible to turn right side out. Once you have them right side out, you can cut that last cord off And I like to take like a little pin and poke out that corner. Now here's a little extra tip. This end is bunched up down here now because there's a seam in there. I like to trim that off because when I sew it to my purse, I don't need anything extra to sew through. It's already thick enough and can be difficult at times. Now I'm going to give them a good press, and that seam that we made, I'm putting along the outside edge. Now I'm going to take these to my machine and top stitch both pieces on both sides, down this side and down this side. And what these will be seen, you want these nice and straight, and what helps me is I just line the sides against the side of my presser foot. That seems to get me the straightest line. So I'll get those stitched. Now I need to sew one strap to each side of the bag. I'm going to start with the front of the bag. I will sew these exactly the same on both sides of the bag. And so what I want to do is sew them 2.5 inches in from the sides. So typically I mark right on the front, but this fuzzy stuff gets in my way. So I actually marked on the back. I measured over 2.5 inches, made a mark, over 2.5 inches, and made a mark. What I need to do now is, if your strap has a prettier side or a front side, you're going to want to sew that down onto the right side of your bag. So it's right sides together. So what I'll do is I'll take the end of this, clean it up a little bit, and I'm going to find that little mark, and I'm going to center my strap on that mark, right sides together, and I usually stick 3 pins in there. I'm just lining it up right with the edge of the bag. Then make sure your strap is nice and straight. Come over, line it up with your other mark, pin it. Now I'm going to do the side with the flap. There's the back. I got my flap kind of hanging down, and I marked these already. So I'm going to turn it so I can see the back, the right side. Now I will take both these to my machine, and I will sew. I'm going to try to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance and sew over those about 5 times to make sure it's nice and durable. Strap sewn on. Now it's time to sew these 2 pieces together. Now I want to sew these together, right sides together. So first thing I need to do is find the edges, because that's what will be sewn together. So I am going to put all my laces around the 3 sides up onto the bag neatly so that I can find the edges. And I'm just going to keep my strap up at the top like that. And then I'll come to the back side. I'll keep my strap up, put my flap up, and I really don't have too much here to mess with. I'm going to take the back side, flip it over onto the front side, right sides together, and pin around the 3 edges. Now that I have all 3 sides pinned, I'm going to sew it shut. I will use a straight stitch, 1/2 inch seam allowance, go all the way around, and once I do it once, I'll go back and go right over top of the same stitch, stitch it twice for durability. I'm going to go nice and slow. Use my denim needle. If you have really thick fabrics, just keep your hand close to that hand crank if you have a tough spot. Clip those corners off. Now I can turn it right side out. Press those seams we just made. Now I'm going to set this aside and make the lining. So for the lining, I'm taking that same pattern that we made for the front and back of the bag, and I'm cutting out, these are upholstery fabric weight. They're a little thicker than I normally use, but that's what I had. We'll see how that works. If you're using like a quilter's weight sort of cotton, that's great, but I like to back that with fusible medium weight interfacing. So what I did was just take my pattern, lay it on the fabric, trace the top and the bottom exactly as it is, but because this is so thick, I went 1/4 inch extra on the two sides. Now I want to make a pocket for both the front and back of the lining, and I'm using that purple fabric. I cut out 2 rectangles. I made a pattern out of copy paper that is 7 inches across and 9 inches tall. Now I'm going to take each one of those rectangles, and on the sides I'm going to fold it in 1/4 inch and give each side a press. Then I'm going to decide which I want to be the bottom, and I will fold that up 1/4 inch, give it a press. Then I'm going to go to the top, and I'm going to double fold that so it has a nice clean edge, 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch. Now at this point, the top part is the only part I'm going to sew, the one that's double folded, and I will just sew a straight stitch right along the bottom to keep that nice and clean. Now I want to pin and sew my pockets, one on each piece of the lining. So I took my yardstick and I measured across and found the center and stuck a pin. That just helps me eyeball the pocket so it's centered. And then I took a ruler and I measured down 3.5 inches from the top and stuck a pin, and did the same over here. And now I'm going to finish pinning this on. Now I'm going to sew these on, staying close to the edges, sewing around the 3 sides, and I will double stitch for durability. I want to add magnetic snap closures, and this is what I have, this little kit. These are 18 millimeter, and they come in 3 different colors. I have a bronzy color, silver, and gold, and I'll link this in my description. So I need to get some parts. Okay, I need 4 pieces here. I'm going to put 1 snap on this side and 1 on the other lining piece. And these are nice and strong. Okay, and I have a piece I call an outie and a piece that I call an innie, and they fit together like that. And then I have 2 backs. Now these are silver because it doesn't matter. They're going to be hidden inside the bag. I want this, see there's a little circle in the center. That's where I'll make my measurements. I want this 1.5 inches down from the top. And I want it centered this way. And once I get that lined up where I want it, I am going, okay, see those little tabs on the side? That's where I'm going to mark. I'm using a marker. You use whatever utensil you like to use for fabric. And I'm going to make little dashes in those side parts. Now I'm just going to make a tiny little snip at those marks. Don't go too big because you can't go back and your snap will be loose if those are too big. So what I do now is I take one of my pieces, it doesn't matter which, put them through those slots, turn it over. Then I'm going to take a tab, put it over those little prongs. I like to take some sort of tool with a little rubber on it. Push those out. You can push them in. I've seen it done both ways. And now I'm going to shake the camera because I like to give those a little tap. That's what it looks like. Now I have to put the outie on the opposite side. Okay, super easy. My snaps are done. Now I'm going to put the lining together. Okay, now I'm going to put my lining pieces right sides together. And I won't even pin this. This is so easy. I will go to my machine. I'll line it up at the top. Do a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down the side. And then when I'm done with that, I'll go back, do a double stitch, and then I'll come to the other side and do the same thing. I'm not doing the bottom yet. Turned it right side out so I could give it a press on those seams. Now, let's put the lining inside the bag. I have my lining inside out again. And now I have my bag. And I am going to sort of prep this for the lining. So I have to open up that flap and put it in the back. And take this strap, put it down. I'm just trying to open up and free up the edge at the top because that's where we'll sew. So everything down. And now I'm going to take my lining, and this is the bottom. I'm going to take the bottom and put it over top of the bag. Put the bag inside the lining, however you want to look at it. And now I just need to line up the top edges and pin all the way around. I have one main tip for you right here. It's important to do this to get these magnets lined up perfectly when the bag's all done inside. So to do that, what you have to do is go to that outside seam of your lining and then find that inside seam of your bag and you line those up and stick a pin. And then I go to the opposite side. Find that seam, line those up, pin. Now you just pin all the rest. It's really easy from here once you have those sides lined up. Now I have it pinned. I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'll just go once because I'll do a top stitch. That will be my double stitch. And I like to do just a little bit less than 1/2 inch seam allowance. Go all the way around. Now I can pull that lining up over top of the bag. The lining is outside of the bag and it's still open at the bottom, right? So we just need to close it up. I'm going to tuck in both sides about 1 inch because these tend to get bunched up at the bottom of the bag, and that just helps eliminate extra bulk. So you can pin this. I typically don't, but I'm going to just so you can So it'll stay together so I can give you a better idea of what this will look like. Now I'm going to double stitch this, staying close to the bottom with a straight stitch. Now I can tuck the lining into the bag. Now where the lining meets the bag, I'm giving that all a good press around that seam. Okay, now I want to top stitch. Here's the opening. I mean, how rich does that look? This is so cute. All right, so I'm just going to top stitch all the way around. I think I'll do about, you don't want to come down too far with your top stitch and hit your snap. So I'm going to try to stay at about between a quarter and a half inch seam allowance all the way around, and I'll be sewing from the outside. Before you put your bag under your presser foot and your needle, this is important. Take your straps and slide them under your presser foot up here out of the way, and do the same with your flap. If you don't do it with the straps, you'll get hung up partway through and you'll have to take it out and reposition it. And I also want my flap up here and out of the way. I am going to sew this tassel onto the flap, and I made this because I couldn't find a tassel anywhere. I went to Hobby Lobby, Joann Fabric, looked at online at Amazon, and I couldn't find exactly what I wanted, not even close. So I made this. I did a quick little tutorial on it last week, so I'll put the link in my description for that. But if you don't want to make a tassel, maybe you can find one at the craft store or online somewhere. And then I have this beautiful little pink rhinestone brooch that I'll add as well. I slipped a little piece of fabric through a loop here so that I can sew it with my machine onto the flap. And I think I want it right about there. So I'm going to take my marker and I'm going to mark where I want it. I'm just going to put a little dot. Now I'm going to take it to my sewing machine, lay these little pieces of fabric over top of that dot, and go over it probably 4 or 5 times so that's nice and durable and doesn't get pulled off the flap. Okay, I have that all sewn on. Just going to clip these little pieces right here. And now I have this brooch. I like to pin these on and then sew them. Now after each area where I stitch, I'm going to knot it off. Sometimes I slip the needle underneath the lining fabric and move to the next piece, but I want this, I feel like this might be a little extra durable, so I'm going to take a little extra time and do it this way. All done. I wanted to wear white because I wanted this bag to be the star of the show. This cap sleeve duster that I have on is a tutorial. I'll put that link in my description, and I'll bring this in a lot closer in a little bit so you can see more of the details. It has a wonderful weight to it. It didn't get too heavy, it got heavier, but to me, I have it stuffed with some grocery sacks to give it a little more volume so you can see what it would look like with stuff in it. But it feels kind of like an old-fashioned carpet bag. The weight gives it just such sort of a rich quality feel. Gorgeous. I don't think any step on this is difficult. I mean, for the most part, it's not. It's just knowing the steps to take in order to get the look. But each individual step, not too bad. Unless you get your fabrics too thick, I broke one needle and that might happen. All right, I thank you so much for watching. I'm gonna bring this in a little closer, let you see more of what the lining looks like all done and more of the details.